God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans. We are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word, another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. And today is Friday, July 27th, 2018. We're getting really close to the feast. As you're going to see today, we're just about 2 months away, and we'll talk about that in one of our stories. We're going to talk about pedophilia today. We want to wrap up the stories we've been working on for the last few weeks, talking about the sexual immorality and the actual decay of morals around the world. So we'll be finishing our program in pedophilia today. Then we're going to talk about the new blood moon that's coming tonight, Friday, on the 27th. People want to know what's going on with this blood moon. Well, we're going to give you a little nugget here that you haven't thought about and be able to give you how you can predict the future. That's what I said. You can predict the future from the information that I'm giving you today. So stay tuned. Also, we're going to talk about North Korea. A friend of mine, minister friend of mine who was talking about a subject on North Korea. We're going to use his newsletter and bring in a subject called North Korea Gleaming a Biblical Nugget. And he has a title on the newsletter, which we'll cover when we get to that portion of our program. But I got two stories I want to bring you first. Israel rescues the white helmets. Israel evacuates 800 Syrians' white helmets and their families to Jordan. Recent news was they actually so far got 400 of them out, taking 400 at a time. So probably by the time you get this program, because we're taping on Tuesday, the balance will be taken out. Now, this has created a furor. I mean, there's an absolute furor in Syria of Israel coming in and doing this, and they're angry with the West for stepping in. But what was obvious is that the Syrian troops, backed by the Russians now, are beginning to win and wear down the rebel forces. And it was obvious that if Israel didn't go in, they would all be slaughtered in the very near future. So this is the story behind that. The IDF says it launched a regular humanitarian effort to save the civil defense volunteers who faced immediate risk to their lives. Refugees to be resettled in the UK, Canada, and Germany. This was a force that volunteers who actually started, I believe it was back in 2012 to help the people who were fighting against the forces of Syria. And actually 200 to 300 of them actually lost their lives in the middle of the rescues over the last few years. They're called the U.S.-backed White Helmets. They were evacuated from Syria, the Assad winning decisively. So this report, what I was reading in this headline is that they rescued the White Helmets because of Assad's victory that's imminent. And so now, in the middle of all of this, we have the United States meeting with Russia, and again, they're going to meet with Russia probably this fall. And in the middle of the whole thing, we're back in one side, Russia's back in the other side. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So in the meantime, Israel, in the way that only Israel can do, they didn't wait for anybody to say or do anything. They saw it was happening. They rallied their soldiers, went into Syria, and pulled these people out to protect them from absolute death and destruction. So it's amazing, again, what Israel can do. So the White Helmets are volunteer aid and rescue the NGO supported and lauded by the West. They were cited for saving thousands of civilians from the onslaught of the Syrian troops from the Allies, driving Western-backed rebel groups from what were once rebel strongholds. So what you're reading from these stories is that the resistance now is just about coming to its end. Hundreds of thousands of people have had to flee. Hundreds of thousands have been killed in the middle of this civil war. And where it's going to lead is where it started, with this man still in power, Assad. When we said, the United States said he has to go, well, another loss in the efforts that were backed by President Barack Obama, who let him cross the red line and didn't do a single thing to stop it. And so where it's all going to lead, I don't know. But there's a lot of conflict with the various sides being picked and chosen and torn apart in the middle of this civil war. And as we know, the Bible says that eventually their capital is going to come to naught. So anyway, I wanted to bring this out to you. I got a couple more slides here about this and telling you what's going on. The Syrian government of President Bashar al-Assad on Monday blasted Israel, the United States, and other nations for evacuating hundreds of Syrian civil defense white helmet rescue workers and their family from the Assad's advancing forces. You know what's interesting about this when I read that little report right just now? Years and years ago, when they knew that there was an imminent collapse, a coming of a fortified city or a fort, like the Alamo, they would come to them and say, listen, we're going to give you so much time to get your wounded out, to get your families out, or whoever wants to leave, they can go. But here you see this dictator just absolutely angry because they rescued these rescue volunteers. That's what they are. They're rescue volunteers. And this guy is absolutely beside himself that Israel would come in and bring out the rescue volunteers. Absolutely amazing, showing you the mindset of the people and the leadership and the dictator who's running this country. All right, going on. We're glad, this is from the United States, it says that we're glad that these brave volunteers who have saved thousands of lives are now out of harm's way, said the State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert in a statement. Said the White House helmets have consistently been targeted by the Assad regime. All right, so now, before I get to this next story, I want you to think about what's going on there. It's almost like Satan, who's going after God's people, who's trying to do God's work and trying to bring salvation to this world through Jesus Christ. And here's Satan absolutely furious that anybody would dare try to rescue the people out of this world. So when you see that in the comparisons to the biblical point, it's absolutely astonishing to see the evil that's actually going on in that country. So I just wanted to bring that out and give you something to think about when you look at these rescuers and you see the mindset of what's taking place over there. All right, now this is the second story. All right, now for our second story today, we want to talk about a town actually in the United States. The United States, there's a town that's banning this family from having Bible studies in their home, and they're threatened with fines of up to $500 a day. This came out through ChristianHeadlines.com on Thursday, July 19th. It said that the borough issued a notice of violation, cease and desist order in October against the Federals. All right. Cedric Heights is threatening the Federals with fines of $500 per day, plus court costs, including the borough's attorney fees for having Bible studies at their home and having meetings where religious songs are sung. How dare they? It's unbelievable. How dare they sing religious songs on their own property or in their own home? Or conducting any religious retreats for church leaders, seminary students, for prayer or for camaraderie building or for fellowship time, and conducting any religious fundraisers, the suit says. In that community, on the very same property, they can hold any other kind of meeting in the world that they want, but they can't hold a religious retreat meeting, a religious Bible study, a religious service. Going on now, we verified that this is a true story. Now, there was a countersuit filed by the family, and this is what's being reported now from Christian Headlines, that the Religious Liberty Law Firm filed a federal lawsuit Wednesday against the Pennsylvania town that allegedly banning Bible clubs and other religious meetings from being held on the couple's 35-acre property. The suit says the town's position violates the U.S. Constitution guarantee of religious freedom, free speech, and the freedom of assembly. So that's what we're looking at there. Now, this is in the report, is what it says. The government should not target religious activities for punishment, particularly when similar secular activities are permitted, said Jeremy Simic, the senior counsel for the Independent Law Center. In America, no government can categorically ban people from assembling to worship on one's own property. Amazing. I have no idea how that got started or what they thought they could get away with, but I'm sure glad that somebody stepped up and challenged this, because you're beginning to see this kind of pressure put upon Christians around the country. The other thing I want to bring out here is that this family bought that property 12 years ago, and they've been doing it for 12 years. But the property was owned by another family, and for the last 35 years has been held and used for the same thing for the last 35 years, including having Billy Graham revivals on that property. So now what's going on is just absolutely phenomenal. But I wanted to bring that to you to make you aware. So as we get these stories, I want to share them with everybody so that we can all be on the same page for what's going on in our country. So now let's get to the first focus of the week. Another tough subject, but it's got to be covered. We've got to talk about this. We've got to make the people in our country aware of what's going on. Pedophilia. We're going to see now that we're talking about the beginning of acceptance in the nation itself. Then we're going to talk about how they're trying to redefine pedophilia and how it really relates to people. And then I got a quote here, is that pedophilia is an unchangeable sexual orientation to be accepted by society. So what you're looking at now is just like it was with the gay rights movement and just like it was with all the other sexual deviancies that's going on today. We're beginning to see now that this subject that has been previously not broached by very many people is now beginning to come into the mainstream and is being brought in at top levels of people, of schooling, of colleges and education, to get the people in the world to begin to accept pedophilia. So we're just going to talk a little bit about it today, and I've also got a video I'm going to show you that I've actually edited down. It was 8 minutes long, and showing how, and I'll just give you the story now instead of later, is that I edited it down, but what the people are trying to do is get the mindset that we need to think like they do and accept them, because these are just poor people who have no choice. They were born that way. They can't control their feelings. So everything that they do, it's not their fault. And these poor people can never have life the way they want to. They have the joy that you and I have. Honest, that's what's being taught. So now let's go through this. This was 2 years ago, in April of 2016. This report came out. It says, pedophilia, a sexual orientation like being straight or gay. In other words, you can't help it that way. So what's next? Rapists? I can't help it. That's just the way I am. How about the criminals and robbers and murderers? Can't control my feelings. That's just the way I am. I was born that way. That's what they're trying to tell us here. Pedophilia is a sexual orientation like being straight or gay, according to a criminal psychologist. The idea that sexual attraction to children is an orientation is highly controversial, as it suggests that offenders cannot change. Treatment to me isn't about modifying, this is a quote, treatment to me isn't about modifying the orientation per se, but getting the individual to find more appropriate behaviors to engage in, they wrote. In other words, we know that's the way you are, we can't change you, but we're going to try to get you to do different things instead of going after little children. Unbelievable. That's what came out 2 years ago in some of the beginning of the change of the culture and acceptance. Now, this has just happened recently. This is pedophilia at a TEDx meeting. For those who don't know who TEDx is, they're like the leaders of the next wave of information. These are the think tanks, so to speak. They're the educated. They're the universities, the doctors and professors and people who go to these meetings. They're all over the world. They're absolutely all over the world. And they lead the way. I'm trying to find the right words so that I'm just not attacking them. But quite often they're leading the way in the next wave of the way the world is going to think and react. And this is where this pedophilia story is coming from today. This is at a TEDx meeting in Germany. All right, this is from the CBN News. This was 7/21 on July 2018. Scholar says pedophilia is an unchangeable sexual orientation and should be accepted by our society. Now, that's the next step from what we just read from 2016, that this This is just something that's got to be accepted by society. It's not going to go away. We have to just accept it and we have to live with it. According to current research, pedophilia is an unchangeable sexual orientation, just like, for example, heterosexuality. Now, isn't that what we just read in 2 years ago? They began to introduce it 2 years ago, and now this is a student, a doctor, professor who's bringing this out, showing now we have to accept this, that no one chooses to be a pedophile. No one can cease being one. How about that? If you have these tendencies and you feel like you're a pedophile, there's nothing in the world anybody can do to stop it. That's just the way it is. So now when you see that argument, now you're attacking these poor people who have no control. They have no choice. They just have to be that way. Going on. The difference between pedophilia and other sexual orientations is that living out the sexual orientation will end in a disaster. Thank goodness they at least got this much in. And they did say that in the video. I will give them that much. That it's an orientation that you just can't live it out. You have to go find something else to do. Well, what happens when they slip up? What happens when that mindset that they say they can't control your feelings, you can't control your feelings, and you just give in to them? Wait till you see the numbers that they estimate around the world of pedophiles. All right? Scholar says pedophilia is the unchangeable sexual orientation. Now, we just read that. Scientific studies indicate that one of the strongest predictors for child sexual abuse committed by pedophiles is a social isolation. So we shouldn't increase the sufferings of pedophiles by excluding them and blaming them and mocking them. By doing that, we increase their isolation and we increase the chance of child sexual abuse. Oh, I love this. I don't know if you just understood what I just read, but what they're saying here is that we can't leave them out there on their own. We have to bring them into society and recognize them for who they are. Because if we leave them out there on their own, the chances are they're going to live out their fantasies of pedophilia, and it's our fault. How you like that? We, and this lady says that, bolding, we increase the chance of child sexual abuse. Unbelievable what they're trying to begin to say, how they're changing the society. Rather than taking what's evil and calling it evil, we're saying that's just the way things are and now calling it good. And if you try to stop it or you keep it out, then you now being the bad guy, that you're increasing the chance of hurting these little children. Let's play that video now.
Let me tell you about Jonas. Jonas is 19 years old. He studies law in Munich. In his spare time, he likes to play soccer. Jonas has a secret which he thinks he cannot share with anyone, not even with his best friend or with his parents. He's just too afraid of anger, rejection, and repulsion. Jonas knows that he has to suppress his sexual drive for his entire life. And he also knows that there will never be a loving and fulfilling partnership that he can enter. Because Jonas is a pedophile. He's only attracted to female children between the ages of 6 and 12 years. The vast majority of all pedophiles are men, about 99%. Within the male population, 1 to 2% are considered to be pedophiles. This translates to about 60 million people worldwide. It is crucial to understand the difference between pedophilia and child sexual abuse, which is illegal and must always be. Pedophilia is only the sexual preference for pre-adolescent children. Right now, most of us feel discomfort when we think about this scenario. And most of us feel discomfort when we think about pedophiles. But just like pedophiles, we are not responsible for our feelings. We do not choose them. But we are responsible for our actions. And we must make a decision. It is in our responsibility to reflect and to overcome our negative feelings about pedophiles and to treat them with the same respect we treat other people with. We should accept that pedophiles are people who have not chosen their sexuality and who, unlike most of us, will never be able to live it out freely if they want to lead an upright life. We should accept that pedophilia is a sexual preference, a thought, a feeling, and not an act. We should differentiate between child sexual abuse and pedophilia. We shouldn't increase the suffering of pedophiles by excluding them, by blaming and mocking them. By doing that, we increase their isolation and we increase the chance of child sexual abuse. I thank you very much.
That was an 8-minute speech, or 8.5 minutes, that I brought it down to a little over 3 minutes. What I want to do is bring out the highlights for it. Now I want to bring in some story flow from the last 2 weeks and put this together with what we're actually seeing today and how serious this is being. How the mindset of the people around the world are just absolutely being manipulated into evil according to what Satan said he was going to do, and like Jesus Christ warned us in the days of Sodom. Last week we talked about how the children, who the transgenders, the transgressors, and is that we need to let them alone. You can't suppress them. They have to be able to be given the freedom to be able to think and be oriented into the way that they were born into, or the way that they feel. We brought in the week before how England now is spending millions of dollars to stop people from trying to stop that. In other words, if you're a minister or a family member and you're bringing about a program to try to stop that way of life, then you're going to be fined and be put into jail. So now let's put those two stories with this one, because these are not isolated stories now. Let's meld these stories together to show you exactly what's going on and how they're taking these stories and in isolation, how they're actually the same thing. Now let's suppose what this woman just said to you is true. Well, there's a difference between child abuse, sexual abuse, and pedophilia for the children. All right? Let's suppose then we separate that. That means that you can't put your will on that child. However, we accept the pedophilia. So let's suppose that the child now who wanted to dress as a drag queen or wants to change its sex decides now, I want to begin having sex with that older person. We can't stop and suppress their feelings because it increases depression and it increases suicide. So what's the next step? Do we now begin putting the pedophiles with the children who want to be a part of pedophiles? Because that's what's coming. And it's going to be accepted by society, because we have just witnessed in that little short 3.5 minute program there, how they're separating the abuse of children by allowing the children who want to be a part of that in pedophilia. I mean, this is just one big mess of what's going on, and showing how the degeneration of our society is just overtaking this world. Well, anyway, I wanted to bring that to you. And so you will be aware of what's going on around the world so that you can help protect your children, because God calls it evil and should not be. All right, so now let's go on to another subject. Now this is a lot lighter, and I'm going to share something with you today, and hopefully it's going to help a lot of God's people try to figure out, because there's so much going on trying to figure out when a new moon is. You know, I get calls pretty regular. I get letters and I get emails In fact, I was up in a meeting way up in Indiana for the dedication, and a gentleman found me up there, and I was on the phone for an hour up there going over new moons and how you figure new moons. Well, God resolved that years and years ago before the world began. Let me show you how this is and how really simple this is because of what we're looking at, a blood moon. All right, a blood moon. And watch how simple this can be and how you too can predict the future. So watch this. This subject's called blood moon. All right, we're going to talk about the time and location of the blood moon that's coming, and the twofold event of what's taking place, and how you can use this blood moon to predict the future. Now, this program's coming out April 27th. That's the date of the blood moon. All right, the blood moon, time and location, July 27th, 2018. Blood moon 2018 is the longest total lunar eclipse of the century, occurs July 27th, that is today. The total phase of the blood moon eclipse of July 27th will last 1 hour and 43 minutes. That's a pretty long time, for to be in a total eclipse, during which the moon will turn to a spectacular red or ruddy brown orange in color, and the total event will last nearly 4 hours. That's taken where it begins the shading and goes into the full eclipse and then goes back out, and we got the penumbra and all the different technical names coming up in just a minute. All right, so that's how long it's going to be. Is this a sign of the end times and another blood moon appearing in July? A lot of people are making the same mistakes they've made in the past. Well, this must be, and no, it doesn't have to must be anything. It could be simply what Joel was talking about, and I'll show you what Joel was talking about, because people misunderstand the verses in Joel. According to astronomers, there will be two heavenly bodies in July which will both appear as red, the planet Mars and the Earth's moon. On July 27th, Mars will be 35.98 million miles from the Earth and will be 10 times brighter than usual. All right, so that gives you the pictures now. You're looking at what it normally looks like on the left side, and then on the right side, how much bigger it's going to be because it's closer, and how much brighter it's going to be. That's the peak, July 31st, but it's actually by 27th. It's going to be pretty close to its peak. Going on. And on the very same day, the Earth's moon will also appear red, but only for a couple of hours, according to the astronomers. It will be at the longest total eclipse of the century, lasting 1 hour and 43 minutes. Now here I've got a picture of where it's going to be visible. We're not going to be a part of this eclipse this time. See, it's over here. Everything in this middle point is going to be seen. And here on the inside, these two inner lines is the total eclipse, what they'll see, and the rest will see partial as you move out of the circumference of where the moon's traveling. So now what I've got here, I've actually got a video now. I'm going to just play this video. There's no sound, so I'll just try to narrate it as it's going. It's only about a minute and a half or so long, and it's going to show you exactly what's taking place as it's going through. All right, so we started with it, and they're going to show you each phase of this lunar eclipse. It begins with the Earth's penumbra. That's when you begin to see the shading going over the moon, kind of like a haze. All right, and then you come to the Earth's umbra, which is like the inner circle of the moon. Now it begins to become completely covering the actual moon. Now we're beginning to see a full lunar eclipse. Now you see it begin to just pop in red when it gets totally closed. Now it stays that way, and as you notice that they're showing that because of the timing, it's changing. And the moon's making this change go through it. And you can play this over and over again. It's really cool. So now it begins to move out of the eclipse, and it goes from the other way. You'll see it moving out from the Earth's umbra, which is showing the complete, the inner. Then it comes to the Earth's penumbra, which will begin to move it out of the shading of the shadow from the outside of the rings. So now we begin to see that's how the event takes place. And there you have it. And that's what will be taking place on the 27th. Of course, you can probably catch it online, but all those in that little picture of showing you where it's going to be located, they'll be able to watch that. And there's going to be a lot of people recording this because of its lengths and how many people are actually going to be able to see that. So now what does it all mean? All right, let's take a look at that. Look what Joel says, Joel 2:30 and 32. And I will show you wonders in the heaven and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. And the sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. So now we have what we're looking at. Let me back that up again. Before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. What people don't realize is this isn't the return of Christ. And people used to use these verses is this is when Christ is coming, and they will quote Joel. But what Joel is saying is that these things have to take place before the Son of Man comes. So what we're looking at in the blood moon tetrads, these moons, beginning all the earth and all its the earthquakes, the volcanoes going off, everything we're looking at, this is the earth in distress. And what we're looking at is God saying that these things are taking place before the coming of the Son of Man. So what God's trying to show us through this is that you need to get yourselves ready. You need to get your houses in order because Christ is going to be coming. It doesn't say how long when you see all this. It doesn't say how long they're going to last. It doesn't say how many is going to take place. So when you try to pinpoint a specific event and saying this must be, chances are you're going to be wrong. And so when you put them all together and you look at the whole picture, then you begin to understand that we are looking at the time that's preceding the return of Jesus Christ. And that is obvious when you look at society and mankind. So basically that's what we're looking at even with tonight's blood moon. But there's more that we know from that. All right, so the time and location, let's go for this. Friday evening after sunset on the Jewish calendar is the 15th of Av. So when I read this blood moon, and I knew it was dead center of God's calendar month. It's the 15th day of the 5th month on God's calendar. So what does that mean? That means from that much information, I can predict the future. And so can you. I received an email from a gentleman and I believe he meant well, but he said that there's nobody on this earth today who can predict when the first of the new moon is on the 7th month of the year this year. He said nobody on this earth can do that. And I sat back in just absolute bewilderment and said, I said, how can somebody write that? But do you know that there are people who are self-appointed now to be moon watchers and report to people when the moon is? And when we follow, I'm trying to be this delicate, because I'm not trying to attack people here, but I'm trying to help people who are in this mix of information, of misunderstanding, and who are constantly trying to struggle to find out when the new moon is and fighting with one another and watching congregations just disintegrate. You know, there's so many independent groups out there now. And when they get this information, they begin fighting over moons and calendars and everything. And because this church has decided to follow what the Bible says is that the Jews, have been given the oracles of God. And because of that, we're being told that we're following man, that all these other people who are fighting over when the new moon is, they're following God. But I'm going to show you how it's actually reversed. That we're not just following a man, we're just following the scriptures and we're following what God has set in place, and the only witness that's still here when God set it in place. That's who we're following. I'm going to show you how you can do that. And God willing, you can put it to rest if y'all fighting over which day, it's a 16th of a crescent, a 32nd, is it the dark, is it whatever it is, it's all been settled for us. Let me show you something. Did you know that by understanding this blood moon, you can accurately predict the new moon of the 7th month? Now, that email told me that no one on this earth knows. So now I'm going to show you how you can know, because it's been set in place by God. And the start of the Feast of Tabernacles. So I can tell you when the Feast of Tabernacles is. Surprisingly, according to God's calendar, the Hebrew calendar that we use today, God's feast starts exactly 2 months from tonight. How do I know that? This moon. Because the Feast of Tabernacles always begins on the 15th day of the 7th month. We're in the 5th month, so I got 2 months to go. It's going to be the 15th day because today is the 15th day of the 5th month. You can only have a full moon. Scientifically, astrologically, whatever you want to term it's going to be, you can only have it when a blood moon, when there's an actual full moon. That can only occur dead center of the month. It's the greatest point, and then it begins to wane. It goes down to the dark and begins to come back. All right, so that's the first and coming back to the 15th. So it's really simple. Watch what we're going to do. So in exactly 2 months from tonight, the Feast of Tabernacles will begin. So now, Leviticus 23, verse 34 and 35 says, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of the 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days to the Lord. On the first day there shall be a holy convocation." Then you can go on and you can finish reading it. You know the story. So what does that tell us now? The 15th day of the 7th month begins Tabernacles, the Feast of Tabernacles. The 15th day is always dead center of God's month. That means it's going to be a full moon. And I've been in the church since 1971. And every Feast of Tabernacles, that moon is full. The 15th day is proven that it's a full moon by the blood moon. It is impossible to have a blood moon at any other time than a full moon. It is scientifically proven that it's impossible for it to happen at any other time. Now, the 27th, this today of July, is a blood moon. It is the 5th month of God's calendar, so the blood moon tells us it is the 15th of God's calendar. Now, I wasn't even looking for it, but when I read the report about this blood moon coming, I knew, without a doubt, it was dead center on the calendar. I also knew that it was in 2 more months, it's going to be the Feast of Tabernacles. And that's exactly what it's going to be. Now, let's show you how you begin to predict for the 7th month. How can you accurately predict when a new moon will be in advance? This is verse 35 here. It says, "I have sworn by my holiness unto David, and will not lied to David, and his seed shall endure forever. His throne as the sun before me, it shall be established forever as the moon, as a faithful witness in heaven." What I'm reading you is in Psalms 89. So what God told David, he says, David, that your seed is going to endure forever, just as the moon has. And he says, "Who is my faithful witness in heaven." So now, if I want to follow God, not man, that means all those people who are out there, and this is where people want to get confused. All these people who are self-appointed to determine the new moon, they have just eliminated the one witness that God left for us. It is the moon. It says, "My faithful witness." From creation, when God set these planets in order, they never change. They are exactly the way they were. And because of that, with the technology that NASA has been able to create through the wisdom that God has given to mankind, they can accurately predict to the minute, in many cases to the very second, when these events and these orbits are going to take place. Just like I showed you in that video with the sun going in and going out. If you look at it, they tell you the degree where it's going to be. They'll tell you the angle on the earth. They'll tell you how long to the second. And they can pinpoint precisely, and they are never wrong. Why? Because God set it in place. Why? Well, how do we know that? Because of the faithful witness, the moon. So all you need to do is understand, when is the full moon? And NASA's got that for eons of time going out. Why? Because it never changes. God set these things in place in order from creation. So now, let's show you something here. How all these events line up perfectly. So I'm going to give you now, this is the 7th month of this year, 2018. All right, so now, there's the 24th of September, which is the beginning of the Feast of Tabernacles. This is Tishri 15 Tabernacles. Tishri 15 is the middle of the month. If you go look at the calendar, you'll see, you'll look at NASA, that's a full moon. What else do we know? We begin counting backwards. So I'm counting the days backwards, going all the way back. We count from the 15th, brings us to the 1st. Now that's not really hard, is it? We know when the full moon is, just count back 15 days. What does it bring you to? It brings you to the 1st of the month, which is the Tishri 1st, which is the Feast of Trumpets, which is a new moon according to NASA. Now, how complicated can that be? Hopefully you'll understand that you won't let anybody else persuade you to do things differently. And like the gentleman who told me that no one can predict, then began to predict when he thought it was going to take place. I know he doesn't mean any harm, but when he finally brought his conclusion, he began the Feast of Tabernacles on the 25th, not the 24th. So he is actually one day late and off the full moon. So he actually began the feast differently than God set according to the moon. So now here's the moon phases. There you have the moon and its full moon. You can actually, and this is NASA, they got it down precisely. So you see 2 days, 24 and 25th, full moon. But the full moon takes place in the nighttime portion of the 24th, which is the beginning of the feast, and it completes its fullness in the daytime portion of the 25th, which is still the same day as the 15th of Tishri. They got this down to a science. And then, of course, there's the new moon on the 10th. The new moon and the holy days, they correspond precisely as God's faithful witness says every single year. All right, let's take a break. I hope that helps. So when somebody begins to tell you about new moons, don't listen to them. God has set it in place. And the Jews to this day have got it right. Because why? Because God has given them the oracles of God. All right, let's begin a video here. I thought this was really great. This is a gentleman who actually helps in Thailand, helps take care of elephants. And he's helping this partially blind elephant with music and bringing it peace. Let's play the video now. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paul in Thailand. I'd like to tell you a little bit about this gentle old female elephant called Lamduan. She's totally blind and has been for some considerable time. I'm going to play her some piano music by Chopin, Bach, Satie and Schubert.
I hope you appreciated that. That was absolutely amazing. This partially blind elephant stopped to listen to the music, and you can see it swaying every now and then into the music. And I shortened the video because it was kind of long. And when he quit playing, then the elephant decided to just start walking again. So anyway, it's called Piano for Elephants. All righty. I want to talk about a subject now. I'm calling this Gleaming a Biblical Nugget for All of Us, and the title is called The Power of the Gospel, and it's referencing North Korea. So the power of the gospel. Actually, last week what I was doing, I was putting a package together for Jim O'Brien with the Church of God in Cincinnati, and I said, wonder what old Jim's up to these days, and because I hadn't kept in touch with him since the Winter Festival, and I went online, and he does a weekly pastor's letter, and does a great job writing these letters. So I read this one, and I said, wow, that's right up the alley, what we've been fooling with. So I gave him a call and told him what I was working on. I said, Jim, I want to use your newsletter to bring out a subject because you brought out something that I hadn't quite thought of in the same way. And, we had a nice talk, and he said, sure, go ahead and use it. So I told him, I said, I appreciated that because I really hated to plagiarize his material. We had a big laugh, and we went on. So now, this is the beginning of the newsletter. So I'm going to reference his newsletter and go into what I'm trying to bring out. He starts off with, have you ever seen a night satellite photo of Korea? It may be the most dramatic illustration of a picture being worth 1,000 words. All right, so North Korea is engulfed in darkness while South Korea shines bright and sparkles like a diamond. I sat back and I read that and well, I never did. I never did go look at the satellite. And so I actually did. And that's what prompted me to give him a call. So here's a satellite view of the world at night. So you can see where you have all your populated people. You'll see all the bright lights. You see the United States. So now let's go take a look at the section over in Korea, which is highly populated also. But now look what we're looking at. So here's China. All right, there's South Korea, and there's North Korea. You see the gap between China and South Korea? Right here. Watch. That's North Korea. Look how dark it is. It's phenomenal when you think about what's going on there with the millions and millions of people that they have there. So now, going on with the newsletter from Jim. He said that Korea was once a single nation of people with the same ethnic and historical background. What caused such a dramatic difference, he asked. The answer is politics. Now, a lot of people would stop and want to challenge him on it, but I'm going to show you why he's accurate. He's actually telling you the story of what the differences is and why. It says, today, South Korea is wealthy, free, well-fed, and productive, while their brothers to the north are starving or a starving concentration camp. South Korea allows the political freedom to preach the gospel, the message that has transformed it into one of the most Christianized nations on earth, while North Korea puts people in prison for preaching the gospel. All right, so that's the key. It's through the religious freedom that allows God to be brought out. And that's what he's bringing out in this newsletter. All right, let's go on. He says this, if you think the case is overstated, look at Iran, Saudi Arabia, China, and Cuba. In each of those nations, freedom to preach the gospel is outlawed and slavery abounds. Politics has opposed the freedom and Christians are enslaved. Now that caught my attention because this program brings in political issues. We're not political, but it brings out the issues that affect our lives and showing you what is actually going on. Now in the newsletter, he goes on to say this. Still, some Christians in America believe it is wrong for a believer to get involved into politics. That concept overlooks the history of the country where 29 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence held seminary degrees. In the first session of the Continental Congress in 1774 was held with a 3-hour prayer meeting. So now, our nation was founded on the freedom of religion, and that's why we've been blessed to bring out the way that that we have in the nation that we have today. That's also why when you begin to see in those pictures, the nations that have more freedom in religion by freedom of government are brightest in the lights that's around the world. All right, come on, let's go on now. All right, it says Christianity was a fundamental force in the founding of our country, and we have prospered. All right, so now we support that view 100%. In fact, we brought it out in the Constitutional Christian. We show how America got in a terrible mess we're in today by the removing of Christians out of government itself. So now let me show you something and how it ties in with the letter and why I thought this was so accurate in what he was writing to y'all, to the people. And so here's the Continental Christian. This is the chart that we devised for the program, the Constitutional Christian. And we show from the 1776 to 2016 what was taking place. We showed at the beginning of 1925, at the monkey trials, it was the removal of Christians in government. Then we showed how by 1954 the Johnson Amendment came in. So from 1925, with moving Christians out of government influence into our society, we see that influence of Christianity removed. And then by 1954, we actually seen the churches themselves, Christian churches, remove Christian influence from the pulpit. So what's happening here? According to Jim in his newsletter, he said the final analysis is when a nation removes God as the basis for law, there will be a human being who will enforce his morals on us. Now that's the conclusion that Jim brought out in the newsletter. Let me reinforce his conclusion with this. By 1973, we began to see the beginning of the replacement of God's laws with man's laws. They're talking about abortion being approved. We're beginning to see all the standards of God pretty much being eliminated. By 2015, we saw the new law come in, man's law, taking out God's way of same-sex marriage created, replacing God's law. And so the truth is, the nations that allow freedom in government, in allowing Christianity to flourish, are blessed above those nations that doesn't. So here's the nugget. All right, this is Matthew 5:14 through 16. It says, "You are the light of the world, a city that is set on the hill that cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and gives light to all that are in the house. Let your light shine before men so that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." In the spiritual realm, I wonder how bright our light shines. So we don't see it like God does. Is that as we draw closer and closer to the end time, and the world becomes more and more like Korea, getting darker and darker, God's people who are filled with the Holy Spirit, they're like this light, a bushel. They began to get brighter and brighter and brighter. John Winthrop began a phrase called the city upon a hill. He said, "For we must consider that we will be as a city on a hill, and the eyes of all the people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken," he said, "and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword throughout the world." They have numerous presidents have used that phrase, but none has ever been quoted more than Ronald Reagan. So what I did is I took two small parts of a speech for Ronald Reagan when he was going into his first election, 3 days before the first election, and then when he was leaving office after his second term. Let's play that video.
In 1630, Puritan John Winthrop, a founder and governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, said in his speech,
"For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us."
And on November 3rd, the day before the 1980 presidential election, Republican nominee Ronald Reagan gave a speech referring to Winthrop's city on a hill.
"If we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword throughout the world. For I believe that Americans in 1980 are every bit as committed to that vision of a shining city on a hill as were those long ago settlers.
A metaphor of biblical origin in Matthew 5. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. It gives light to everyone in the house.
The Bible, its impact and influence continuing through the ages.
The past few days when I've been at that window upstairs, I've thought a bit of the shining city upon a hill. The phrase comes from John Winthrop, who wrote it to describe the America he imagined. What he imagined was important because he was an early pilgrim, an early freedom man. He journeyed here on what today we'd call a little wooden boat. And like the other pilgrims, he was looking for a home that would be free. I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. That's how I saw it and see it still. And how stands the city on this winter night? More prosperous, more secure, and happier than it was 8 years ago. But more than that, after 200 years, 2 centuries, she still stands strong and true on the granite ridge, and her glow is held steady no matter what storm. And she's still a beacon, still a magnet for all who must have freedom, for all the pilgrims from all the lost places who are hurtling through the darkness toward home. We've done our part, and as I walk off into the city streets, a final word to the men and women of the Reagan Revolution, the men and women across America who for 8 years did the work that brought America back. My friends, we did it. We weren't just marking time. We made a difference. We made the city stronger. We made the city freer. And we left her in good hands. All in all, not bad. Not bad at all. And so, goodbye. God bless you. And God bless the United States of America.
And just like Winthrop and Ronald Reagan, we too, as God's people, are a beacon that stands upon a hill. And through that example of Korea being totally blacked out just about, and the rest of the world, you and I need to be that shining light to this world that's going to look more and more like Korea as time goes on before Jesus Christ, so that we can be that hope for this world, for the return of Jesus Christ. Well, okay, that's our program for tonight. I got a little long-winded at the beginning. Sorry about that. We run a little bit over time here. But here we're going to bring from the home office, we're going to begin wrapping this up. This year's feast giveaway, we got the Feast of Tabernacles. We have On the Road to Tomorrow, which is a music CD that Mark Rosinko has been really working hard on, very diligently to get out. We'll tell you more about that as time goes on. And we're going to be giving you the Satan's Plan of Deception, which is what I have right here. So it'll be a 3-part DVD that we're going to give out at the Feast of Tabernacles of 3 sermons that we delivered earlier in the year. We put them together in a special feast package, and so you'll be able to get yours there. Now, what I want to do today, we want to introduce a little promo that talks about this special package that we're going to give out at the Feast of Tabernacles, and I'll be right back. Well, be sure to stop in the Feast of Tabernacles at registration and get your copy, because it's the first time we've ever put these in a special package showing you the complete plan of Satan for deceiving mankind. All righty, in the mail this week, last week actually was as in the days of Sodom. The newsletter went out, and we're offering the video as in the days of Sodom that'll go with it. And in the mail coming this week is going out is God's jump-off point that I did a sermon I offered in the card last month. And then in a second DVD is a sermon by Steve Council, We Shall Behold Him. And on the same DVD is a sermonette by Dennis Ulrey, a deacon in Steve Council's congregation in Indiana. If and Then it's called. So be sure to get your copies if you haven't had them yet. Okay, there you have it. That's our program for today. As always, we want to conclude our program with a little upbeat video. And this time we're going to conclude it with The Secret to Living is Giving. All right, let's play our little video and we'll be right back. Welcome back. By the way, that's actually a true story that was written off of. So wouldn't that be amazing if something like that happened again? So there we have our dogs at the beach, and I cut it off a little earlier, but there goes our shark. People are looking for that little shark going by, especially on Shark Week. This is Shark Week. So let Discovery know we've got the shark in the picture. So I want to play that again. All righty, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in to News, Nuggets, and Insights. And as always, from all of us here at God's Unchanging Word, thank you for participating and being a part and sharing this with your friends. And God be with you till next time. Remember now, 2 months to the Feast of Tabernacles. When you see that moon tonight, don't let anybody tell you anything different. God be with you till next week.